Hi everyone, Kevin Purcell for GottaBeMobile.com. And as you can see, of course, I've got my iPad Air, and here is my Surface 3. This is brand new, just came out, and so I want to give you some of my first impressions and compare it, of course, to the iPad as well as the Surface Pro 3. Now, everyone has to admit that the iPad has to be sort of the gold standard for tablets, especially in the 10-inch form factor. As you can see, the iPad is smaller, but the screen size is fairly similar. Now, with the Surface 3, we get a widescreen format, whereas this is a 4x3. So it's not a perfect one-to-one comparison. However, the question is, can a Surface 3 replace an iPad? Or would someone who was an iPad owner really find this a little bit limiting, or would they find it freeing? And that's kind of an interesting question. As far as just hardware goes, the iPad's super fast, and it runs tons of apps. There's more apps than you can imagine on iOS. And that's really the biggest issue with the Windows Store apps. As far as hardware goes, though, I think it's an excellent choice. The reason is it's got more expandability thanks to a regular USB port. Of course, we've got our micro HDMI output port, or mini DVI rather, output. Now here is the new charging port. It's just simply a micro USB port. This also will handle data, so you could plug a micro USB cable into it and data will flow both ways. Here we've got the little cutout that allows you to pull out the kickstand. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And then here is the headphone jack on the back. On the bottom of the Surface 3, we get the connector for the dock and keyboard. We'll talk about the keyboard in just a second. On the other side, there's nothing. And then across the top, something new is they have put the power and volume up and down rocker across the top. Now, immediately what people are going to do is compare the Microsoft Surface 3 with the Surface Pro 3. I think a better comparison would be to the older Microsoft Surface RT tablets. And that's because of the size, and it's a little bit underpowered. Compared to the Surface Pro 3, it doesn't have near the power, and therefore it's not going to run as many apps and software as the Microsoft Surface Pro 3. But notice the Pro 3 is a little bit bigger, and you still get the same size bezel, the window on this edge, window button on this edge, the start button. We get a camera sensor and mic up here, just like we did before. As far as the ports go, of course, across the bottom, you still see the dock and keyboard connector. Notice that the volume control is gone on the side. That's because they moved it to the top. We still get the power button in the same spot. Also notice there are no vents on the Surface 3. That's because with the Atom processor, I guess they don't believe it's going to require that much active cooling. And the charger is different. As we mentioned, it's got a micro USB charger instead of this proprietary charger. That also gives it 2 USB ports instead of just one. And now we have the volume port over here, whereas on the old one, notice it's on the other side over here. Looking at the back, this is one of the first devices, I believe it's the first device that comes with just this window icon on the back instead of saying Surface. Notice the other one said Surface. And also another difference is the kickstand on the Surface Pro 3 is a lot better, and that's because it will stand at any angle you choose, whereas notice with the Surface 3, not the Surface Pro 3, but it has 3 angles because it snaps into those places. I'm sure this mechanism costs less to make, and that's probably why they did that. By the way, if you want to, if you're willing to, they've made this that it'll sort of break away if you put too much pressure on it. You won't break it. It will, however, kind of pop down. I'm not really wanting to do it because I tried it once and it felt like it was going to break. So that's one big difference people might not like, is the key the kickstand here on the Surface Pro 3 is just a lot better. But I haven't, in use, I haven't seen that it's a real issue. Now what you still get is the nice snapping keyboard, and pops up just like it did. I personally don't like to type on it that way, so I leave it totally flat. And it seems to do a better job of turning, well, not now. It did a better job of turning the screen on and off. I'm not sure what's different right now. Maybe if I go to... No, it's not turning it off at all. It was. I must have changed something in the power settings. It still has this sort of felt cover, and that just collects lint and dirt. It gets ugly really easily. But the type cover is very good, except for one thing, and that is this terrible little trackpad. It's just nearly useless. It's there if just in a pinch. Now, of course, since we've got the Surface Pen that comes with every one of these, right? No, not so much. They left this out as well. So every Surface 3 that you buy comes without the type cover and without the pen. Now, are those essential for it to work? No, you don't have to have them. However, the enjoyment you'll get out of your Surface 3, just like the Surface Pro 3, is greatly diminished without the Surface Pen and without the type cover. A lot of people online are complaining, saying it's not fair, to compare the iPad without a keyboard and without a stylus. A lot of folks like me complain, saying Microsoft should put the pen and the keyboard in the box with the Surface 3. Of course, that brings the price to $680 instead of just $500 for the 64 gigabyte version with 2 gigabytes of RAM. I bought the $600 version, which is 128 gigabytes of storage and 4 gigabytes of RAM. And people say, well, the Apple doesn't put a keyboard and stylus in their box either, so why is it unfair? Or, why don't you compare it that way? You'd have to put that much in there. What about a really great keyboard that might cost $130 and an excellent stylus that costs $50 or $75? And that's a fair point, except for this. It feels like the iPad is a lot easier to use without a stylus and keyboard than the Surface 3. And that's because of one reason only, and that is the Microsoft App Store. I'll be honest with you, it's really hard to find excellent quality apps in the Microsoft store. And so it's important. I think that's an important distinction. And so this really has to be compared as a computer, a laptop with the pen and with the keyboard. It's almost essential. Now, you could get a cheaper keyboard. You could get a cheaper stylus that's not using the fine tip with the active digitizer. You could do that, but it's really all just one package. And in all the advertising, you see the pen and the keyboard, and they act like it's all one package when it's really not. It's 3 different purchases with this one. So my first impressions, this isn't a full or complete review yet. My first impression is this is a great device. It's excellent hardware. I think it, with enough apps, could potentially be an iPad killer. But because of the huge lead that Apple has in the app ecosystem, it's going to be really hard to compete. Also, you always know that if you go into an electronics store or an office supply store or even just a department store like a Walmart or Target, you're always going to find iPad accessories, whereas it's hit and miss whether you'll actually find these. In fact, it's so early, I doubt you'll find very many Surface 3 accessories at all. This has been Kevin Purcell with a first impressions review of the Microsoft Surface 3. My conclusion just early on at this point is it's an excellent piece of hardware. Not quite an iPad killer yet. It is a great alternative, lower end alternative to the Microsoft Surface Pro 3. It will run most of the apps that you want to run. And so if you're looking to get into a Surface tablet for less than the Surface Pro 3. This is a great option, and I think that you should go ahead and take the plunge.